Banter. Does it ease stress or does it cause it? Today I'm talking to Stella Chandler, who's an expert in this field. But before I talk to her about that, I want to ask her what stresses her out on a day-to-day basis. So Stella, what can you tell me?
Well, I will have to admit, it's when should we say, a domestic appliance doesn't do the thing that it says it should be doing on the box.
Reading instructions still, or not really?
No, it's just I've checked how it works, but it just doesn't do something.
Yeah.
No, I've got a food processor and it tells me it's going to do all these wonderful things, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is operator failure.
Over promise and under deliver. Yeah.
Spot on.
So what do you do to deal with that kind of a stressor?
Well, I'm now aware that's a vulnerable point. So I kind of have a little message in my head going, domestic appliance that may not do what it says it does. Warning, Stella, warning.
Yeah. So just kind of being aware that it's happening. And yes. I guess if it's not working, and you take it back. But sometimes I find that we think something's not working because we're trying to do something too quickly. And it's just having a bit of time and space to get your head around how this one works as opposed to that one. But we tend to be rushing far too quickly. Yeah. Or it's just rubbish and they've overpromised and under-delivered. and then a bit of swearing might be okay.
There's a lot of truth in what you said a few moments ago, I think, if I'm really honest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about banter. First of all, what is it?
It's interesting because I'm talking regularly to people about this, and I love to get people to think about the definition. Often it starts with people having a laugh together, and that's great. Can bring down some barriers, can ease some tension, start to build rapport. So good banter is all of those things.
Okay. And enjoyable for everyone, hopefully. Otherwise it gets into the dark side of banter, I guess.
That's the absolute key point, yes.
Yeah, so what makes it not an enjoyable experience for everyone?
Well, exactly as you have said, and we talk to people about the point where somebody starts to feel uncomfortable. Now, in the moment, sometimes that does happen and it's a passing thing. But what we see with banter, when it starts to make people feel uncomfortable, but then that's often the point where people do it all the more. So if they've given somebody a nickname that they're sensing the person doesn't like, or they haven't even checked whether they like it or not, but everyone else is laughing, they just keep doing it. That's when banter flips round and all of the good things that we talked about a moment before can stop happening. It easily puts the barriers up. We talk a lot in the work, well, in life, which is brilliant, about diversity and inclusion, but people often don't join up the dots. When somebody is feeling uncomfortable and it starts to feel excluded, then that's when we're failing then to be creating that inclusive environment. This could be in the workplace, it could be in our friendship groups. People rarely stop and think about that.
I kind of think about the word excluded quite a bit because I often use the word isolated, and I was trying to think, what do I mean by the difference between those two, because they sound like the same thing. And to me, the difference is excluded is where people are almost pushing someone out, and isolated to me feels more like the person bringing themselves out. And I guess if the banter is the kind where they feel hurt or put down, they may isolate themselves, but it may be something that excludes them from the group. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yes, it completely does. And there are occasions where perhaps people reflect themselves and think, oh, perhaps I was oversensitive. It really was just a joke. But as I say, very often, and that's where we start to really think about what do we mean when we're talking about banter. Very often, though, it goes on because it's often then, say you've got half a dozen people in a group and they're targeting one of the people. So those 5 people feel very included in the joke. The 6th person, the person feeling uncomfortable, perhaps, the butt of the ongoing joke, very much starts to feel excluded.
Yeah. Do you have an example where it was meant in a positive way, but wasn't received as such.
Very much so. And interestingly, only on Friday, I was talking to a gentleman who volunteers in a number, he's terrific what he does. But because he's an older gentleman, when he goes into a meeting where there are younger people, they very often refer to him as uncle. And he was explaining that to me, that he knows that they do it as a term of endearment. For him, it highlights on every occasion he's older than most of the people in the group. Now, I have tremendous admiration for him. His energy levels and what he does and what he gives back to other people is just fantastic. And I really felt for him when he shared that with me, that there's that sense of, you know, each time, oh, I'm a bit out of this because I'm a different age. But he's giving as much, I sense probably a little bit more than others, but he's having that feeling of exclusion and being singled out by people.
Mm. And they probably mean it as a term of endearment, but it's not feeling that way at all to him. And no. I'm just thinking, so in that particular scenario, if he said, look, I really don't like it when you call me that, is that the right way to deal with this situation?
Spot on. In natural fact, we talked through that on Friday. And the next time he's with those people, he's going to really think about that. So he's thinking about talking to a couple of people individually who he thinks will really understand and support it. He anticipates everybody will, but he thinks if you just mention it to a couple of people and get their sense on it and, you know, them to support him, yes, and then he's going to just ask the group. And he'll do it, I'm sure he'll do it in a very calm way. He's not accusing anybody in any sort of way, but he just wants people, and again, a really important word, we talked through this on Friday, is he wants them to see the impact it has on him. Doesn't think they intend to upset him at all, but the impact is it does make him feel, you know, as I say, a little bit isolated, to use your word as well, but very much sort of, you know, excluded from them based on the fact that he is that little bit older than them.
Because one of our needs as human beings is to fit in. So we like to have some differentiation between us, but we want most of all to fit in with the group. And so that kind of is something that does create a difference that he feels is uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very interesting point turned around as well, because very often, we talked through this as well, very often people joke and go along with something when they're part of it. It can help them feel like they're fitting in. We find this often in the workplace. Managers will often laugh with something. Maybe they sense it's not quite right, maybe not, but what they're appreciating, right, you know, can get this, they're appreciating when someone else is making a joke and they are part of it. They feel like they're fitting in with the team. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Very often this is about fitting in, and more times than not, we open up conversations and ask people to really think about it from sort of different viewpoints. More times than not, people say, oh, now I think about it, I just kind of got swept along in the joke. Coming back to your point, I felt, you know, we were fitting in, everybody was laughing, that felt good. Very often it's all those kind of things, but we just need some people just to be able to stop and think, hang on a sec, you know, has the joke gone too far? Does this person really like this nickname? If they do, and you really know they do, so always really ask one-to-one, that's fine. But if they don't, and most of us talk and think about wanting to respect other people, this is a key example of where we can respect other people if we draw a line under the joke, or as I say, stop using a nickname.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, so most people will be swept along with the joke, but if somebody has that interpersonal sensitivity where they're kind of aware that the other person isn't comfortable with it, and it might be possible for them to start using his name instead of uncle, so perhaps leading the way in the right way to address that person rather than the nickname that they see creates discomfort.
Definitely. And as I say, with that example, the couple of people he thinks will really get it very quickly, absolutely, they are going to be supporting him in making sure that everybody refers to him by his first name.
Yeah. So we're in the kind of Me Too phase of our evolution as human beings, which means that, you know, some things that people found were just jokey now can be highly offensive. So do you have any recommendations about how people might deal with that now that we're in this kind of phase of humankind?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think this applies to in our workplaces, but I urge people as well to do this in their friendship groups and their circles. And it may not seem easy at first, but they will absolutely reap the benefit. It's just opening up those kind of conversations, not doing it in a telling way, but just opening it up and getting people, and a phrase we very much use, the 21st century workplaces are looking very different to the 20th century workplaces, but also our lives are as well. And that's why it's really important. You know, we tend to, certainly obviously in my work, I'm working with clients in a working setting, but I'm always saying to people, all of this also plays out in all aspects of our lives. And, you know, certainly the example I gave of the gentleman volunteering, but there's lots of people as well I know that don't welcome that same kind of behaviour, whether banter's crossed the line or inappropriate behaviour, potentially, you know, as well. We often link Me Too with inappropriate sexual behaviour. You know, all of those things now, we need to be talking about them, and we need to be able to tell people when, you know, that line has been crossed and we've started to feel uncomfortable. Many of the things that happen actually where we talk about in terms of sexual harassment have often started with humour, where banter has started to cross the line. And then we often talk about innuendo and things like that. And it has grown. And that not everything, but often that's where it starts actually in many of these issues, around that humour, where people just haven't themselves been able to draw the line, or other people haven't been able to appropriately tell them that they've crossed that line. And we need all to, you know, to build up the courage to do that.
Because these things can really escalate too, can't they?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
And I guess thinking about social media and email also, for that matter, something that's in the written word, you haven't got the nuance that you get from the voice and the body language. So something can hit a lot harder, can't it, when it's in writing?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, when we're reading something or we're talking to one another as we are now, you know, they say that, you know, we are listening. Over half of it, 55% of it is our body, our body language. 38% is our tone, only 7% our words. So of course you're spot on. Translate that into something written, and of course we are putting, as the reader, we're putting all of the tone on it. It was interesting, the comment I made about the 21st century workplaces. We talk to people and get people to stop and think, is that many people now, you know, our lives are blurred. You know, when I started work, I'd say goodbye to my colleagues, maybe it's sort of 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, not see them till Monday morning or have any contact with them. Whereas nowadays, a lot of people have their colleagues in their social media groups and things like that. Overall, we share far more information about our lives than we used to do. So that as well, we just need to stop and think, that information we're sharing, are we inviting people as well? We often are, to make comment on it. So yes, life has changed in many ways, in many ways for good reasons, but it has also made it that much more tricky, I think, to navigate some of those things about what's okay and what's not in terms of behaviour.
There's something that I've studied, if that's the right word, called nonviolent communication. I don't know if you've heard of it. No, but that is a really useful. It has a kind of structure of words that is really useful to use with people when you're very uncomfortable about something. And I teach it to a lot of my clients, and it goes something like this: when you ... it makes me feel. And I really like that, because it helps you to deal with a conflict situation. So even though the the deliverer of the banter may have felt the banter to be just benign and jokey. When they are told, when you say that to me, it really makes me feel small or disrespected, and I know that you don't mean that, but that's how it makes me feel. It's easier for the other person to receive, isn't it? So I just think that's a really nice little structure to use that helps people.
Very much so.
Also, something that comes to mind is that you know, how many people have a really broad smile and an easy laugh, but underneath they are struggling enormously. And so a bit of banter from a person or a group of people may be a lot worse than just not hit the mark. It may be the thing that tips somebody over the edge, doesn't it? So
I agree entirely, and I am very concerned. We talk a lot, which again I'm relieved about, and a lot more talk about, you know, mental health, and people are encouraged, and there's a lot of, you know, lots of support around for people to do that. But it still takes a brave step to talk about it for the first time, perhaps talk to a friend or something. And again, if you are in a group of friends where there's a high level of banter, and I think particularly, I don't want to sound sort of stereotyping here, but particularly amongst men, amongst young men, very often there's that style of that kind of banter. I worry hugely that it puts them off just asking for help at the point that they really do need it.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Okay, any other little tips, or have we covered it enough?
No, it's been great. I mean, funnily enough, something happened in a team meeting last week, which made me think of our conversations. One of the team was sharing a story with everybody that the very first time she and I went out on a business trip, she'd already been to visit the client. She confidently told me where we were going, and she ended up walking me into a local police station. And we've had, you know, a few laughs about that. Anyway, she mentioned it in a meeting last week, and she just said to me, she said, "I've just realised, Stella, you have never, ever referred to that in a meeting." And I said, "No." I said, "I very much feel it's your story to tell, not mine." And that's just one of the sort of the tips I give to people. If they're thinking whether this really is fun for other people, just stop and think, is that maybe your story? Should you wait and see if somebody else wants to talk about that? And I think just again, a great way of thinking about managing the banter in a team, because we do all like a laugh, and I think again applies to any friendship groups as well. A good point I think to remember is, if you have had a joke about something today and somebody's taken the joke, as a phrase we often use, how about thinking, you know, tomorrow, you know, look back and say, you know, that was yesterday's joke, let's have a new one today.
Yeah.
And if we can do some of those sorts of things, we can have a laugh, which of course we want to. We always want to be able to do that. But there's also just some sort of ways of managing it, so we don't have the joke that's been around forever and ever. And, you know, we just are not thinking then about the impact that could have on somebody. So I think some of those kind of techniques can help us still have fun, but not at anybody's personal expense.
That's great advice. Thanks so much. And I think you've got a book that you want to talk to us about that you found inspiring or uplifting in your life.
Yes, funny enough, it's an older book and it stays on my bookshelf. It's a book called Psychology for Trainers by Alison Hardingham. It's still available, I think, down as an ebook. The biggest thing I took from this book, which absolutely guides the work we do now, is that we learn the most when we are really participating in it. So that's why, again, you know, whatever environment we're in, the best way of actually opening up discussions about the kind of things we've talked about today is to do it in a very participative style. Get people really genuine, you know, asking questions and learning from one another. So I thank Alison Hardingham for setting me out on that journey.
And for people listening, you know, we can learn so much, can't we, from other people? So we can learn what we like about what other people do and what we don't like about what other people do, to start modeling the way that we want to be in the world. So, you know, learning is an ongoing process, isn't it, in interpersonally and otherwise. So just having that, your mind open, I guess, to learning those things.
Mind open and really listening to what other people are saying.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
That's lovely. Thanks ever so much, Stella. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this interview today. If you have, do please share. If there's any comments you'd like to make, do make your comments below. And if you haven't subscribed, do that as well. Thank you.